Welcome into episode 4 of Hoops Forum, presented by Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, Randy Sherman. Before we get going here, I want to thank our sponsors over at 323 Sports. If you're in the market for a team dealer, look no further than 323 Sports. Whether it's uniforms, team gear, spirit wear, sports equipment, they can do it all for you and for your sports program. To find out more, visit 323sports.com, or you can get in contact with a rep at sales@323sports.com. They will do it right for your sports team. As always, if you're watching, we'd love for you to be a part of our conversation. If you'd like to share your thoughts or things that maybe you see or have learned from in your own coaching, or maybe you have some questions that you'd like for us to answer, feel free to reply to this post here on Twitter, and we'll be sure to work those comments and questions into the broadcast. Randy, how about maybe since this is a part 2, maybe for those that weren't with us last week and haven't had a chance to either watch the video or download the podcast yet, which a lot of people have downloaded the podcast. I was really surprised, even the amount of people that have downloaded it. It dropped today. I know a lot of people have watched the video as well. But if they haven't seen that, maybe can you give them a little bit of a summary before we get into this week's part 2?
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about pace and space offense. That's kind of the style of play now, and we last week focused mostly on pace, and pace mostly as it pertains to transition offense, creating pace with how fast we transition from defense to offense. A little bit of space talk in transition last week, where we talked about getting width and depth and showing up in the half court with good positioning and width and depth in transition, leading to good positioning and space in the front court when we arrive. So I thought today, we'll go a little bit longer on half court maybe and the space aspect of pace and space.
One of the things that you mentioned last week that I thought was important in differentiating between positioning and space, and not necessarily confusing those two terms, but keeping them separate, and the skills aspect with the space. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that? And I think that'll springboard us into what we want to talk about specifically with like the actual skill work and things to make things more practical for coaches.
Yeah, so just to put a finer point on the difference between spacing and positioning, I sometimes even inadvertently use those synonymously where I shouldn't. Is positioning is simply put where we stand, our alignment. Are we 5 out, 4 out? Where are our spots, so to speak? That's independent of our skill. This is the configuration, the construction that we play offense from. Your spacing is impacted by your skill, meaning if I have team A who's got 4 perimeter players who really can't shoot so well, the defense can sag off of them, protect the paint. While they have what could be to the naked eye look like good positioning, they're high and wide, they got floor balance, but like they don't impact the defensive spacing. There's no gravity to pull it out. So what we want is good positioning coupled with good spacing, meaning our skill level pulls the defense apart, thus creating gaps and seams and opening up the area around the rim.
I heard this on a broadcast the other night, but basically the announcer said something to the fact of, well, that team just isn't able to create good space because they don't have anybody that can shoot. Is that an accurate way of thinking, or is that kind of like victim of my circumstances, or is it a little bit more involved than that?
Well, it's just the facts. If we can stand where coach tells us, but I can't make the other team guard us there. I don't coach that team, so I can coach my team and say, hey, we want to hit the corners, we want to have high and wide slots, but our skill and our ability will dictate, whether we can create space or not, because the defense, simply put, doesn't have to respect where we stand and guard us there, right?
Yeah. So the spacing, if you have the team that has ultimate spacing and really puts the defense in rotations and gets the defense moving and is able to attack closeouts and whatnot, what would you say top skills that we need to be working on or we need to be focusing on a daily basis?
Yeah, I coach a lot of coaches who are moving their programs and their teams toward a pace and space style of play. So we talk about this all the time. There's kind of 4 bullet points of okay, this is how we want to play. And what are the priority skills needed to play this way? Meaning, what do we have to be great at for this at the end of the season to have been a success? I'd say the 4 bullet points are starting drives, stopping drives, catch and shoot threes, and attacking closeouts, or reading/attacking closeouts. So there's your skill development menu right there. Like that what are we working on today? Those 4 things, one of those 4 things, all of those 4 things. That's it. Starting a drive well, meaning we got to be able to catch it with good established footwork, so we can start a drive effectively without traveling. Stopping a drive, we've started the drive. Now we have the intent on finishing at the rim, but we don't. So we got to be able to stop ourselves. And then finishing is also a part of stopping a drive. I stop the drive by scoring, right? Thirdly, catch and shoot threes. I start a drive, I collapse the defense, I kick, and if I kick to that player, we got to be able to make that shot. That's our offense. We got to be able to make that shot. And then thirdly, if we want to play off of that pass or one more pass, we're going to draw a closeout, and we've got to be able to assess whether we have time, space, range to shoot over that closeout, or do we need to start a drive again. So it's just a cycle: start a drive, stop a drive, catch and shoot 3, and assessing closeouts.
I had how much time should we spend or devote to this is what a thought that I had when I first started this. And I've had coaches ask me, and to be honest with you, we devote all of our time to it.
Yeah.
It's segmented. Sometimes we'll do the small sided games where you're working on the decision training and the finishing and passing and dribbling and that kind of thing. We will do block. I'll be honest with you. I know some coaches are knocking that, but I think shooting is one of those block skills that needs to be not just on air, but with defense too. And there's drills you can do with that. But I mean, that literally is like our entire practice. That's the thing that I love about basketball is the simplicity of it and how we as coaches screw it up because we make it so much more complex than it probably should be. But there is some complexity that goes along with it too. And maybe that's where we can get into this next part here. And it's talking about, coaches will say probably that are listening, I already know about the finishing and the shooting, but okay, so how can I then create space? And the poll that we had asked this week. So what is your favorite way to create space on the floor? Assuming that your players can finish, they can shoot, or you're working towards that at least. Okay, so what are some of those actions or things that we can do within the half court? What did you think about the final results of this week's poll?
I like it. I thought it was a good poll. I think the leader there cutting without the ball is probably the most simple way to open space, and probably deserved to win that poll. So that's
what would this have been even 5 or 10 years ago? I would have thought the ball screen would have actually been even closer than it is right now. But I know a lot of people that follow the two of us are using more of this patience space, which emphasizes. So it may kind of be asking it in a drum here, but
Yeah, I think maybe even too, some coaches might look at they look at the ball screen as an action to create an advantage, not necessarily as a way to create space, but it is a way to create space, because if I bring the law of space, if you will, dictates that if we contract space in one area, it enlarges space in another. So if we bring 2 players together in a ball screen, or a DHO for that matter, we're bringing those 2 players together, thus enlarging the space away from that 2-player action. So it is a way to create space. It may not have been interpreted that way, but I would say it is a way to create space. But I think the right option won here.
And then, talking about then the spacing on the floor and how we refer to that, just so that people understand kind of what we're referring to. The next part of it being, that the gaps here. And so explaining to someone, have you always, has this traditionally been how you've explained it?
It's how I've learned to explain it. I'll say that it's a simple way to look at it. Like in your first slide there, you have what what looks to be a traditional sort of 5-out alignment, where you've got top, wing, corner filled with, and the space between each of those players, there's symmetry around the 3-point line. The space between each of those players is a single gap. General rule of offense that I try to impart on coaches and thus they impart on their teams is we don't want to drive into single gaps. So the reason being is it's too easy for the defense to sort of plug that gap and not pay a penalty of a 3-point attempt. I call it short help, short recover, right? So we're not far enough apart, say, between player 1 and player 3. If one in your first frame drove with his or her right hand through that gap, X3 could kind of shrink, stunt, swipe, whatever, and not pay a penalty of the kick out. They can recover back in time. Whereas in your second frame, where you've got a little wider gaps by going to a 4-out alignment, if one drove with their left hand down the lane line, X4, if they were to help off the strong corner, has a longer help, thus longer recovery. So there's just a greater amount of space. Going back to frame 1 with the single gaps, the good news thing is that you've opened up space around the rim to cut into. So the law of space, again, would dictate we're compressing space around the 3-point line, thus it opens space around the rim. So yes, it's really a matter of preference, but generally speaking, we want to stay out of driving into single gaps. So before player 1 in your first frame there in that 5-out alignment were to drive the ball, we want to cut one of those wings over to say, let's say we want to drive right-handed down the right lane line. We need 3 to get out of there. And if 5 to hold that corner, that would open up a double gap on that side of the court. It would tilt the balance of the floor to the left side, and we've got space to the right side to drive into.
I would challenge coaches to think just about the fact too that you go back even like 20 years ago when we're denying one pass away, and a lot of teams are kind of going away from that. And so it's now, as hard as that was, it's even harder now because now you have teams that are sitting down in gaps, whether they're playing a pack line defense or some sort of gap defense. Mm-hmm. And it just, we tell our guys almost every day, stop driving into single gaps. It almost never leads to anything positive.
Yeah, it almost a lot of times it leads to a turnover. You get the ball swiped, you get tied up, you pick up your dribble because you know that guy shows chest and you stop your dribble, and now we've disrupted the flow and the sequencing of our offense. But
I almost feel too that it's kind of a waste of a couple seconds, because let's say that you even do draw somebody like you said, then you're pitching it because that's just the natural read. But when you pitch it, it is a short closeout for that help defender to recover to. And so essentially all you've created is you've wasted 3 seconds on the clock that you've taken away from your time. And for a team that's playing like us at college level, we basically just wasted a few seconds.
Yeah. So what's our rule for getting that? I don't want anyone watching to think I'm naysaying this alignment, this 5-out alignment. I'm not. So what's our cue for when to cut out of this gap? So if one has the ball top of circle here, our cue for 3 to leave that gap is when he's looked at, dribbled at, or pivoted towards. So if one has the ball at the top of the key and he looks at 3 doesn't clap for it, doesn't V cut, just get out of there. Just cut out of there. If I pivot towards you, that probably means I'm about to either drive that way or dribble that way. So cut out of that single gap. What we really want is for teams that do still pressure the passing lanes and do deny that try to disrupt the rhythm and timing of your offense with a bit of denial. If my offense is dependent upon me making a pass to a static or stationary player in a single gap, that's very disruptible. Like they can. Do you
prefer if they make a basket cut or a 45-degree cut or a slice cut to the other side? Do you feel like that one or the other helps better with creating more space, and in this case, gaps?
I don't know that that's neither here nor there really. Like, I mean, ultimately what we end up with is that player leaving that wing spot, thus opening a space. You might be able to get a backdoor basket cut. You might pass it to one and be able to give and go across your defender's face occasionally. But I think a challenge that I would issue to coaches, and I did in a recent article I wrote, is begin to view the purpose of cutting less about like scoring and more about opening space.
Yeah.
So, I hate to say like no basket cut. Like, I mean, you might get one. You might catch an overplay and you backdoor cut, you cut to the rim, and we with that 5-out alignment, we've got vacant area around the rim, and we capitalize on that with a cut to the rim.
And I think that is what the key is, what you just said there. Like if I'm capitalizing on an over aggressive defender, if you're not, probably what you're going to end up with is when that guy vacates, and if you do basket cut, his defender is going to be standing in the middle of the lane, just giving help anyways, which is not going to create anything good for you. But this one is the last slide that was on the last slide, but you can see it now, kind of the triple gap of the dots indicating where somebody might be. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then the advantage
slot and wing vacant. Yeah.
Yeah. And the advantage of something like this is then obviously on the drive, now you have a lot of space to play with, right?
Right. So 4, 3, and 5 on the left side of the court, their space is compressed. They're kind of close together. Following the law of space, if you compress space in one area, 5, 3, and 4 over here, it creates space here where this big green bubble is, right? So we've compressed it by tilting the floor to the left, thus expanding it to the right, and we've got a nice sizable gap in the perimeter defense to get the ball into.
So let me ask you on that diagram even there. I think the next question is, so I got a guy that drives, but he stopped, and maybe I drew X2, but maybe I didn't. Like, so what now? What do I do now?
Okay. Well, anytime we drive, we're driving with the intent to score at the rim. So a lot of times you'll see a player driving and they're driving to pass. They're not driving to score. You can get yourself in a little bit of trouble that way by driving to pass, because then the defense takes the pass away and you kind of get that moment of indecision, like, oh, I thought I was going to have an outlet to pass to, and now I don't. So when we clear space, maybe 3 here in this left corner, it's cut out of that and cut diagonally across the floor, thus opening the space. We clear space. We want to drive the ball into that space to score. And I'm thinking score until that opportunity is taken away from me. So that's why we said starting drives well. One here has to start a drive without traveling. Good footwork on the catch. Hopefully they've established their feet. They're able to start a drive without traveling, gain a small advantage over their defender X1. They're using that advantage till the scoring option is exhausted. So then the next fundamental skill to have acquired would be stopping a drive in the event that we don't score. So we would probably emphasize being able to stop in 2 different manners. One would be a stride stop, which would be, in this case, same hand, same foot. I'm dribbling right-handed. I'm going to stop right, left. Same hand, same foot. Right, left, quick. But I'm going to stop on 2 feet. And then what we would like that you don't have drawn on here is some penetration reaction around this drive. I'd probably want X2 to hold their spot. And I would want 3 and 4 if our rules drive right, move right. So drive right, move right. So he's driving right. I would want 3 and 4. Definitely 3 and 4 to be moving around the arc to where we get someone, it would be 4 in this diagram, into their taillights. So if we can stride stop finish over our guy, we can go ahead and do that. If we stride stop and we get into a pivot, we look for the fill behind, which would be player 4 cutting into the taillights of the drive. So those are the things we're looking for in the event we don't score. Other kind of secondary options would be turning that dribble into a post up. You see Villanova do a great job of this. Jalen Brunson, who's now with the Dallas Mavericks, was great at it. He would drive and get down in there, and he's a small guy, get in amongst the trees and and they have so many shooters they wouldn't want to leave. So instead of throwing up some running floater or something, some garbage that's going to hit halfway up the glass and never go in, he would change hands, change shoulders, and turn that dribble into a post up. That's another option that exists to keep the possession alive when the drive doesn't result in the score.
Something that we've tried to emphasize with our guys, it has helped a lot too, and in continuing to kind of keep, because if we go back to the pace from last week, you can quickly stop pace and allow the defense to set when you get into the paint and you pick up dribble, stride, stop, and now you don't know what to do with it because you weren't able to finish over the top.
Yeah.
And going to what you just said, where you turn around, and we call it the Barkley, but it basically just swap hands, right to left, back to the defender, and now you're backing them down, trying to post up. And even if you don't have somebody that's like, that's where I think we're moving now into how is the game being played now, where it's not necessarily I throw the ball into the post, but it's that throwing the ball from the post once you've used the guard to get down into the post. And obviously we all know you get to a passing point guard or you have a tall point guard, which to your point with Villanova, you've got your taller guards or better guards who are able to pass out of the post. And you can continue to keep that pace by not giving up your dribble. I think the other action we've talked about before maybe is the Nash, where you dribble underneath, because the question I get a lot of times is, so what do we do with the 5 now? And basically the 5, again, if this is about spacing, it's keeping the floor that 10 to 12 to 14, depending on where you're at on the floor, keeping that between each player so that you are making help defenders decide, do I go help on the basketball or do I stand with my man? Mm-hmm. And so if the 1 continues to dribble underneath, the 5 basically just continues to circle movement with him. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we've drawn the attention of the 5 defender, and you get a layup, easy dump off for the 5 there at the basket. So, I mean, there's a lot of things to do if you continue to think pace and space in this scenario here. Are there any other actions or any other things even out of this one slide that you have thought of that have been helpful, or things that you have seen teams do?
Yeah, sure. Whenever we stop our drive, we'll make a second cut. Meaning, remember I said on our drive, we want penetration reaction. For me, it'd be drive right, move right. And so 3 and 4 would be moving around the arc in concert with the right-handed drive. So drive right, move right. That's my first cut. That movement around the arc. Now, if he were to stop and pivot and Barkley, or like you're describing, and our defenders have sort of tracked us around the arc, we might stick our foot in the ground and cut behind our head inside of the arc as a second cut to be an outlet to the guy who's stopped his dribble into, or who's stopped the drive into the paint. A lot of times, man, there's something about that ball going inside the defense that gets defenders to turn their heads. Like they turn their head and they watch it. So it's not hard to envision if 1's driving at X and 3 and 4 moving, X4 and X3 having their eyes looking inside. And as we cut, we see an opportunity to cut behind our defender's head and make a second cut. Our first cut's the movement along the arc or around the arc. Our second cut would be diving into the shell of the defense to provide an outlet for the ball. So that second cutting principle would be another big one that I think.
That year that Villanova had Brunson, I think it was Archidiakono, Spellman. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, because I wrote something for Fast Model, but they had about 5 guys that shot 35 or above. I think Spellman was shooting like 41% from 3.
Yeah.
And there you find clip after clip of this action of him getting into the post, whether it was from this opposite slot or just driving to a wing, them clearing out a side, and just turning around and backing all the way down.
Yeah.
And after you get to about 6 dribbles down, which at this point, you know, the mom up in the stands is screaming to pass the ball because everybody's just standing around. But it was very strategic as he would continue to back down. And on about that 4th or 5th dribble, he's got about 4 defenders' attention on the outside. And you have basically just that fill behind that you say get to an open window is what we tell our guys. And somebody always ended up with a wide open 3-point attempt.
Yeah, it's just hard to resist not head turning there as a defender.
Yeah.
There's something natural about wanting to turn your head in there. That's hard to resist. It's hard to resist, even when the scouting report is shouting at you, "Hey, all these guys can shoot. You got to stick with them."
Right.
In that year you're talking about, Texas Tech, they lost to them in the Elite Eight, but they did a pretty good job with that. That's the game to watch. They really made Villanova beat them with tough twos, and Villanova beat them with tough twos and at the free throw line in that game.
Yeah. Before we kind of finish up with the plays, do you have anything else before? I don't want to rush you onto anything, but
a couple talking points. You know, we kind of divided this conversation between pace and space. And pace, I don't want to put that in just the transition offense box, that word pace, because in the half court we can still play with pace. Pace would mean we cut hard, we sprint our cuts. The ball moves with pace. The ball pops. We know where we're going with it next, and the ball moves with speed. Players cut with speed. So pace can also pertain to half-court offense. I just wanted to drop that in there because I didn't want that word to not be carried over into half-court offense. So that's really one talking point I wanted to bring about there, just to make sure I put that point out there.
For my pace and space coaches, something that I would suggest is don't be afraid of just either false actions or just false movement to then get into we're trying to actually score off of this.
Yeah.
If I wasn't coaching with a shot clock, I would sometimes probably say to my team, let's go out there and move the ball. Let's cross 3, 4, 5 sides, and then let's get into an attacking mode, because the idea of playing against a set defense, you move 4 or 5 times side to side, you may end up the first attack that you have may be literally a wide open layup.
Yeah, I see that a lot with the coaches I work with, that there's not enough sort of side to side movement to sort of build some I don't know what the word I would use to describe it. Like, we sort of loosen up the defense, just sort of like massage them, I guess, like get the defense moving up, down, side to side, and then it becomes a little easier to penetrate, rather than we're just going to come right down the court and try to shove it down the right lane line with the drive. That's pretty tough unless you have really a special player, to trigger that.
My C's from the DISC assessment will want to be tracking this. I do this, but I like to track sides of the floor. I also like to touch paint touches. There's a clinic that I went to about 2 years ago. I can't remember exactly which coach it was, but anytime that they got 2 paint touches per possession, they were shooting something like 50 or 60% from 3-point range or something like that.
Okay.
So, again, trying to shoot for that. Obviously the point is to score, but if you're moving the ball from side to side with pace, loosening the defense up, you're able to have a more of an attacking mindset. Hey, let's try to play through the elbows, get to the paint, at least get a paint touch off of this. That could be something. That's not the goal, is to get paint touches. Obviously the goal is to score the basketball, but
it's a triggering event.
Yes, you may start to see some correlation. And again, that may be something that you as a coach know, and maybe you don't even communicate that necessarily to all of your players, but that may be kind of a goal that you're trying to get 2 paint touches or 3+ per possession. I track this literally every game, but what are we shooting? 1 side, 2 side, 3 side. And a lot of coaches do that, but especially in the pace and space offense, where you are trying to exploit gaps and move side to side, that may be something to look at and keep track of as well.
Yeah. And really, what are we trying to do at the end of the day? 10,000 foot view. What are we trying to do? We're trying to create conditions where our shot attempts, our field goal attempts, are either at the rim or they're threes of the catch and shoot variety. So everything we're talking about cutting to create gaps, moving around the 3-point line in concert with drives, is all about creating the environment to where when we score or when we shoot, it's either at or near the rim, below the volleyball line that cuts through the middle of the lane, down in the charge circle area, or it's beyond the 3. So that's sort of playing to the numbers. It's what the space part of pace and space means.
Right. I think we're all trying to get 3 points per possession. I don't necessarily know that every system or every coach knows how to do that. It's just, well, let's just make a lot of threes or get to the basket and draw fouls. Okay, like how do you go about doing that? Like show me how to do that. And that's something that we have in the last couple of years that we've run this. Our field goal, our free throw attempts have gone up and our 3-point attempts have gone up. And so I think that this kind of system can actually help you accomplish what you've said for years you're trying to accomplish, but it actually gives your players a chance to do those things.
Yeah, I'd say the first steps, we got to get out of our own way. I can't make the defense. I don't coach that team, but I have a say so in where we stand, our positioning, to where the guy, like if you look at old NBA highlights like Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, people like that, making all those acrobatic twist and turning like Dr. J, like half of that was like getting the ball around their own players, like their own teammates, right? Like, but now in the NBA, like there's these numbers have sort of like created this model of the way they play. That we're not having to navigate our own teammates anymore. The defense is plenty. Like why I'm asking my guys to score over their own guys? We call that friendly fire in our gym. We like that was friendly fire right there. Like you're in our own way. Like. So
you probably saw this, but the diagram that showed the NBA like 20 years ago, and then currently, and the shots are taken.
Yeah, great. I'll plug Kirk while we're on here. Kirk Goldsberry, he wrote a great book called Sprawl Ball. That's all about that. Kirk Goldsberry. So, shout out.
Probably to your point, though, a lot of those mid-range jump shots were because there was somebody in the way where they wanted to actually go, but the mid-range jump shot.
Yeah, we can't get to the rim because we got Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale on each block, right? We can't like Bird can't get to the rim. He's got to pull up from the elbow because there's obstructions between him and the rim.
Yeah, right. All right, so we promised this, so we'll show it. The coaches that love the plays kind of these are more like quick hitters. I'm thinking more of these being like maybe an ATO or a set, out of a after a free throw, or I have a blob at the end too.
Okay.
But these are you're seeing more and more of these on Twitter being posted. And I feel again like their coaches still think that this is just a quick hitter. These are quick hitters, but you can do these in conceptual offenses as it just being part of the free-flowing nature of the offense.
Sure. Just some principles in place that create this.
Yeah.
So this one here is a dribble handoff here where 4 and 5's movement would be, if you look at where all the arrows are going, right, over here, the tips of those arrows where we hand it off, where we're cutting to, we'd be compressing space here by compressing players. 2 takes the handoff, and now there's expanded space to attack. So compressing players in one area creates space in another.
Isn't it kind of funny how this, as somebody watching this, may kind of buck against this mentally, because we think players move to get open to score. But really, this play is players are moving to create space for my teammate so that he can score.
If there's a soccer coach watching this doesn't feel weird to them. Because if you watch soccer, this is how it's played. You see overlapping runs and guys cutting out of space, and then Messi dribbles into space, and offensive sport is about the manipulation of space.
Yeah. All right. Next one here. I picked this one because
I've seen this one from Kansas. They run this a lot. Yeah.
2 of coaches' favorites. They love the horn set, so put them in a horn set. You got the ball screen, so maybe you can get something out of the ball screen, but it's not necessarily meant to be designed for the one to come off the ball screen and score. But my favorite,
everything prior to the drive is just window dressing.
Yeah. So 1 creates space by basically that 45, that slice cut there to the opposite corner. And, I harp on this, and people that follow me are probably sick of hearing about this, but you have those back-to-back actions that sometimes are hard to guard for defense.
Yeah.
So they got to come off the ball screen and defend the handoff. You got the switching team. You may end up with a big guarding a small, which you can exploit that and get. I mean, there's so much space. That's almost a quadruple gap over on that side.
Super gap, yeah.
So, yeah, really big
And
gap
then,
over on that.
And then you don't have the defense drawn out here, and that's fine. But like you put when we get that red squiggly drive going downhill underneath the elbow there, you put them in position to where a dilemma where X2 has to probably break a defensive rule, and that's leave the corner to help, or stay attached. And if you got a good shooter there, then it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Like I got to help. This guy's about to score, but if that's a really good shooter in the corner, then coach is saying, don't leave this guy. You can shoot. All right, it's kind of pick your poison.
I like this one as well, too, based off of that, just because if the ball's over there on the weak side, most defenses are being taught, if you're X2, to have at least 1 foot in the paint, even maybe 2 feet in the paint. So as the ball's being driven, sure, he'll start to get out to 2, but that's still a 4-step, 3-4-step closeout. There's a good chance that guy's going to be wide open when you turn the corner. Maybe a quick pitch over there to the corner off the dribble penetration. So, yeah, I like this one a lot.
Tough, yeah.
I put this one in here for a couple of reasons. One is to give our guys over at Fast Model Sports a shout out. I actually used this one this week for the play of the week that I did for them.
Okay.
And it's an old one because we've seen the ball being thrown in 4 low. This is the out of bounds play on the baseline, 4 low for a lot of coaches that like the 4 lows. And you just have the opposite big kind of clear out and the 4 can drive to the basket. But I thought about the fact that we probably were using this before. A lot of coaches were using double, triple gaps, but it really is a triple gap over on that side that with the same principle we just talked about. This is for another time too, but I'm sure you've seen this, a lot of European basketball using that sprint behind. So 3 like sprinting behind, that usually most defenders, X3 here, probably not going to be paying attention to his man very much. He's probably going to be looking at the basketball. So the potential there for on the sprint behind that you can get a wide open 3, 4 drives to the basket, stride stops, nothing there. And this goes back to your point at the very beginning. You do that sprint behind by 3, fill behind, you can turn around, pivot, and pitch it back to the 3 for a shot.
Yeah, so 5, 1, and 3 all would be drive left, move left rule.
Yep. Yeah. So again, I mean, it's the same principles all over the floor. It's just, how and getting all 5 guys to play together and move together, that spacing component too, that I think that, we've been talking about this for almost every week we've been doing this, but like 1 through 12, if I work on this kind of offense, it narrows those gaps between 1 and 12, and you end up with players who end up knowing how to play basketball.
And another thing too is these principles can become habits because, like if I run a bunch of plays, that's my offense. I got to have 5 guys out there. They're not running those in open gym. When we're playing open gym or they're playing. They're not doing that. But these some principles like drive right, move right, drive left, move left. We can get that in 3-on-3. We can get that in 4-on-4. We can get that. What I wanted for my teams was what the teams that I coached was for our open gym play to look not that different than our actual play, right? So like we're playing 3-on-3 in open gym and we've got pass, cut away from the ball, create a gap, drive into it, fill behind, drive it, move in concert with the ball, all those things. So like the principles can be applied to whatever side size, 2s, 3s, 4s you want to play from.
Yeah, that's good. It's just, again, it's the packaging of it. I think it's good basketball. We all recognize it's good basketball, but it allows you to package something and give it to your players, and then they can understand how to play rather than teaching them plays. And sure, you're teaching them about basketball, but you're giving them a little bit here, a little bit here, and they're operating as robots. And then the robot gets broken, and now I got to put in a new robot. He doesn't do it very well. You're teaching your players, all of them, how to play basketball.
Yeah. And this is how we score, guys. This is how we we got some rules and concepts to follow around spacing and shape and things like that. And we work on our finishing. We work on our catch and shoot 3s. This is how we score. The play doesn't score. These skills score.
Yeah. That's great. Last word, anything else you might have?
I'd say the number one question that I get about this would be, sounds great, coach, but like my guys or my girls, we can't do those things right now. And I'm like, that's what practice is for, right? So like, Amazon started in like a garage, right? The Beatles were playing in like bars before they were selling out stadiums, right? Like, you start before you're ready. You got to start before you're ready and just go. And I understand that makes a lot of coaches uncomfortable, but like, you've got to start before you're ready to sort of have what you want someday. So, when I started Radius Athletics, I had 0 followers and nobody caring about what I tweeted, and now it's a job. I started way before you got to start before you're ready, man. You just got to.
Yeah, Randy's got a lot of resources that are available. Reach out to him. He'll be able to set you up with those. There are some things that I have on CoachTube that will be small-sided games that will teach you how to do this.
Awesome.
That may be helpful as well. Appreciate all of those who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch or listen to any part of it or watch the whole thing. Visit Radius Athletics on YouTube to see the full interview, or you can wait till next Friday. We'll be releasing on the podcast, a quick Timeout podcast. Just search for that on any of the podcast platforms, and you'll be able to find the audio version for the show. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next week on Hoops Forum.